And hello out there to all you Metsian folk. It's been a long time, but this is the Metsian podcast, and we are so thankful that you're here to listen to us. It's been a crazy month. I'm going to break protocol a little bit, break a little format before I bring on my co-conspirators in this podcast to kind of open the show with first the congratulations to mainly Dusty Baker from me, but to the Houston Astros as a whole. Congratulations for winning the World Series. Congratulations to our division rivals, the Philadelphia Phillies. I'm happy that we're not going into another offseason where a rival of our division are world champions. But you guys gave it a crazy run, and at some point, I really thought you were going to slay the dragon. Unfortunately, for you, that just wasn't the case. But got it. I think a lot of people within the Philadelphia zone, including Bryce Harper, just seem to take another step in their development. And, you know, it's hard not to make it Met-centric when you see Zach Wheeler on the mound, when you see Rafael Montero on the mound. It's so funny the way this always becomes about us. Of course, that's what's going to happen, but there always seems to be so many reflections and recollections and projections of the Mets on everything involving baseball. And that's something we can get into. But I also just want to say that, like, you know, it was a really tough way that the season ended, of course. But like the way it happened for me, you know, the Atlanta series felt very similar to the feeling I had after Game 4 of the World Series in 2015. It was just that entire series, as you saw it, just, you know, and every single lead we took in those three games just fell apart, completely fell apart. I'm pretty sure that we haven't even been on air since before the Atlanta series. I may be wrong, but that might be how this entire thing came to now, is that we haven't even talked since the Mets blew this thing. And, it just, the wild card ended up kind of being the anticlimactic part of even though, like, throughout that entire thing, it was just like by Sunday, I couldn't wait to turn that game off. That was 6-0 with Joe Musgrove's shiny ears. And it really, this is one of the reasons I think why we couldn't get back on air, because we had to process it. We had to, and we felt as if that we needed to process it with the entire, finality of the season completely at hand with baseball itself. Because at first it was just like, well, what is the point? Not in terms of us going back and forth. Like I felt so much cynicism coming off of these 2 years in a row that no matter how much it changes, it always stays the same. And what's the point? If you win 101 games, what's the point? Win 111 games. Look at the Dodgers. What's the point if it doesn't matter until this particular point? And like I have to combat that because I want to enjoy every baseball game. I mean, look at what, some of the Giants had a bye week this week, and the Jets upset the Bills. And if the Jets, who knows what's going to happen with the Jets? I'm a big Jets fan, but, like, you still have to enjoy that game against the Bills without thinking that it's not going to matter at the end. And baseball's longer. Baseball is, it literally, we, especially in this day and age, we put such a magnification on every game. Like, I want to still have that magnification. Before even Twitter existed, I personally was invested in every game that way. And many of us were. And I don't want that going away, which is one of the things I had to combat. Like it's just like that feeling of dread sitting in your heart. I was at the game on Friday when Max Scherzer got booed off the mound, which is something, the booing part is something to talk about regarding, like, New York overall macro-wise. But, you know, at the end of the third inning, I'm pretty sure. Like, you know what? I didn't boo him, but I accepted the fact that that's what I was witnessing, where I was. But you still had the next game. You still had two more games if you win the next game. And it really was the Atlanta series where it all felt like just you hear all these stories of the past, whether it be Mickey Owen giving up the curveball from Hugh Casey against the Yankees and the Yankees winning, whether it be just based on whether it be Daniel Murphy specifically, but there's so many different options. That's what Atlanta felt like. So San Diego didn't completely feel like that. And by Sunday, it was just put a bullet in us by the end of it. So those are some of my feelings, and that's what I just wanted to reflect on before I pass it on and over to my co-conspirators. I'm glad that we gave this a month and a half. And, guys, I'm going to pass it over to you. Besides, hellos, how are you doing? I want you to go off the way I just did, first 5 minutes of the show, and we're going to start with Rich Spirago in Connecticut. What's up, Rich?
Hey, Sam. Nice opening. I think what you just did is kind of everybody is. It's a lot of thoughts swimming around in your head simultaneously. And so what I would try to add, and I'm not even adding, but what I would say at this point is, my general thoughts are, I see a lot of people say, you can't write off the season. It was a great season, 101 wins. It's the fourth time in history, all that kind of thing, that they won 100 games. And then other people say the season was a disaster. Well, both thoughts can live simultaneously. Winning 101 games is good. And especially when you're the Mets, 60-plus seasons, 61 seasons to be exact, and only done it 4 times. So, yeah, that is something to say it was that very good, right? But to say that somehow it was okay the way they went out, no, that's not good. No, that's not acceptable. And I'll tell you why I feel that way. Because from the middle of September on, something was off with this team. Pretty much, you could almost say that ever since the trumpet game, something was just kind of off. Getting swept by the Cubs, we all point to that. But it wasn't so much looking at these things in isolation, like getting swept by the Cubs or after the trumpet game, losing 2 out of 3 to the Nationals. It was the way they looked over a longer period of time. Now, you started to have a couple of weeks there where they just weren't as crisp as they were. And so while I'm very disappointed in the way the season ended, I'm not surprised. The team didn't look good from Labor Day on. And they had little pockets. Yeah, they swept the Pirates 4, but they're still the Pirates. But they didn't look – something was wrong. I can't put my finger on it, but we all know it. Something fell off the table at that point. And so if going into the Braves series, and you're right, that was the last podcast we did, was the Thursday before that weekend series, I was telling people I was worried they were going to get swept. They just did. The Braves were playing crisp baseball. The Mets were not. And then after that, losing to the Padres, that didn't surprise me at all. I'm pointing to trends. They were trending in the wrong direction. So none of what happened should surprise anyone, frankly. Now, going back to my previous statement, they had a good season. If they build upon that, and it's going to be hard to do with a lot of new players probably, but if they continue the continuum, if I could use that word twice, great. You're building towards something, maybe in a year or two, parade down the Canyon Heroes, great. So, yes, you could say that was a very positive development, 101 wins. But the fact that they had a bad month of September, rolled that right into early October, and then exited, you can't wash that away by saying 101 wins. You just can't. It doesn't wash that away. Those are my thoughts, and I'm not sure if any of that made sense, but that's where I am.
I think it's a defense mechanism for a certain Met fans. They're just like, hey, 101 wins. Hey, 101 wins. I mean, even people with the manager of the year, I mean, mind you, obviously they voted at the end of it, and so they're announcing the 3 finalists. But Rob Thompson, who's in the World Series, doesn't even get any credit. I'm not saying any of those 3 shouldn't be winning the manager of the year. I'm just saying that something seems skewed. It has nothing to do. The 3 managers of the year all won 101 games and were out before the championship series. So there is that. Mike, what is going on with you, man? Michael Colon.
Oh, boy. How are you guys? Good to speak with you again. Hello, Metsville. Where am I? Oh, boy. You know, they went, 15-11 in September and 3-2 in October. Yeah, Sam. 3 losses in Atlanta, you know, but we miss winning the division by 1 game. We lost 61 games in total. Pick one. From April through October, pick one. You know, different opponent, perhaps different outcome. But 101 wins, you know what? I still rave about 86 wins in 1976. I'll be one of those people who will look back on the regular season with fondness. How it ended? Oh, what a disappointment. Are you kidding me? They wet the bed. They really did. And they petered out. And ultimately, you know, Pete Alonso and Lindor couldn't carry the offense by themselves. We didn't get that complementary output that we needed. And of course, the Marte injury, you know, didn't help. But the pitching, Scherzer, even deGrom, he had been struggling for a couple of games leading up to that series. The Padres, the Mets, look at the playoffs. Outside of the Astros, all the favorites got upset. This was a playoff tournament for the underdogs. So it's weird, but I ultimately have to go back to my opening statements for the season, my frame of thought in spring training, entering this season. And that was that they can go as crazy, wild, and willy as they want to over the next 3 years, 1 season down, 2 to go, until they rebuild this farm system and they start churning out talent, you know, with some more frequency and quality. So, you know, this year and the upcoming seasons will still be a spending spree. Correction is ahead. So it didn't work out, and it sucks. But I'm going to stick with my frame of mind and say that whatever happens over these 3 years with Buck Showalter in place and whatever assortment of players they can put together, you know, let's have at it. At least I know we'll be competitive. So the outcome's going to have to separate that a little bit. What I want from this team now, you know, after 23, entirely different. And no, I don't expect Buck to be in place. I want to see, you know, an evolution, but I also want to see a great mutation away from what we presently are. But that being said, you know, I had no aspirations to bring up Vientos or any of the other guys. But now that we did, and they have, or their clocks have been started, I want to see them more next season. You know, I want to see Beatty. I want to see Vientos. And everybody knows who I'm leaving out. Prime catcher. So now that they've, you know, gotten their cup of coffee in the major leagues, I want to see them more. So, you know, you've taken them out of the package. They're no longer mint. So play them. But like I said, ultimately, I want to see this farm system rebuilt So by 25, we're cranking out talent. And then, Steve Cohen's money will undergo a correction. So I'll stick with what I've been saying. His money needs to prop up this team now that 2022 is done. They'll need to do it again next year, and they'll need to do it again in 24. After that, I expect things to change. Whether Billy Epler is part of that, I don't know. You can look back with hindsight and say he may have dropped the ball. He may have adhered to whatever it is that he adhered to that, got so little in return for his efforts. Let's put it that way. So that's where I am. It sucked the way it ended, but, 101 wins, except for that one ultimately decisive loss, was still a lot of fun. So that's where I am.
Yeah, and it's just so many things that, what happens after you haven't talked in 5 weeks that you just brought up, like Alvarez in the wild card game. A whole separate conversation to have at it. But you got to start, I believe, considering it's the freshest in the Mets news, other than the opt-outs. But, we all expected those, so let's kind of put those to the back burner right now. You mentioned Steve Cohen right now still using his money to prop up, and I think it was genius. And by the way, I also want to mention the fact that Sandy Alderson is now coming back. It's a conversation to be had about the front office, what that means for Billy Epler, and what that means for the Mets franchise. But the first move that the Mets made in the offseason was, as far as I'm concerned, taking care of the most glaring, obvious need that you could within the 5-day window. And when I heard the news, I was like, great. Clean our hands of that. We don't have to worry about Edwin Díaz anymore. Rich, do you agree with me? I personally think that was absolutely brilliant. And maybe, considering we're talking about Steve Cohen's money, maybe Billy Epler, without Sandy Alderson around, making his first statement of the offseason, personally.
I totally agree. I think, when you think about it, right, if you lose a starting pitcher, and I think we're going to go with that one eventually in this podcast, you can build around that. You typically have a 5-man rotation. You could restock that rotation. How many great closers are there in the major leagues? There are a few, right? Diaz being one. There are some other ones. Presley's very good. You can go on. But a closer is a closer. Even though baseball has changed over the years, most teams still rely on your ninth-inning guy, and Edwin Díaz is an elite ninth-inning guy, and that's fact, And so if the Mets – look at it like this. For people who say they gave him too much money, time will tell on that. Time will tell if he opts out after 3 years or keeps the whole 5, whatever. Is he as effective in the out years? We don't know that. We could speculate, but that's not even worth it. But the fact is, if you don't bring him back, you have now would have created, I should use the subjunctive, you would have created a hole that is very difficult to fill on a team that intends to contend. You need a good back end of the bullpen. You have a great back end of the bullpen guy, the guy at the very back end. So if you don't re-sign him and he goes somewhere else, you've now created an enormous void that's very difficult to fill. It's not like position players or starting pitchers where, again, you could build around it. If you don't have a ninth-inning guy and you intend to compete, good luck with that one, So why would you not retain this guy? The only argument against it is it's a record-setting contract for a closer. Okay, he may be dominant in a few years. Mariano was, right? People who say that, it's almost like they have this fatalistic view that he's not going to be effective in a couple of years. Sure, that could happen. But I'll take the approach that he's still young, And I think he will be effective in the out years, even if he's 80% as effective. So I think it was a great move. Absolutely.
Mike, if you look at his season, I don't blame him for that hit, in the second to last, the last game of the Mets season. Like, I just don't blame him in any way, shape, or form for the only real blemish other than the San Francisco game on his record for 2022. This guy was one of the greatest closers in your history, probably, especially considering the flip from where he had been in Mets fans' minds. Like, Met fans, it seemed almost universally, got immediately completely behind it. Because you can't deny the talent. Bottom line, the talent was there, regardless if there was some weird 3-year transitional phase that also included the summer of 2020, which is an anomaly unto itself. So, as far as I'm concerned, you have the current obvious greatest closer in the game, somebody who finally, you've always talked about their talent. Their talent. To be perfectly honest, they weren't as bad after 2019 as 2019. So when you all of a sudden see it all come together like we did this year, it's a marketing strategy too. Like look at the way it all. He transcended baseball, which is something that doesn't happen, number one, for a closer, but doesn't happen a lot with baseball these days. Like Ken Griffey Jr. You got to keep him.
Don't hold back. Say what you feel, man. He proved himself. He's gained a little bit of maturity, and he's gotten acclimated to the big city, and he earned it. I think it's money well spent, and I really can't add much more.
Well said. There you go. Short and sweet. Rich, obviously we have the opt-outs. I feel like the opt-outs with deGrom, we all knew it was coming. Walker, we knew that was coming too. So, there's something anticlimactic about it. Now it's just about whatever direction this offseason goes, really, for both those pitchers. Hey, Rich.
Dollar in the jar is muted, sorry. I said yes. What I said was yes, Billy Epler has to earn his money this year. A lot of important decisions to make, and they're all connected, right? So about the opt-outs. Well, with regard to Walker and Carrasco both have some degree of options. They have to figure out what they want to do there to the degree that they can control that. If they're not player options, and then deGrom opted out today. So right now somebody tweeted today. Right now the Mets rotation as of this minute, with what we know, is Scherzer and then McGill, Lucchesi, Peterson. Obviously it's not going to be that, but that's the way it looks right now in terms of definitive people coming back. So a lot of decisions to make, a lot of very difficult ones to make. Do you, throw the money at deGrom? Do you not? Do you take what you would have thrown at deGrom and throw it at Rodon, who also has an injury history but's younger? I don't know. A lot of work has to be done. The Mets, I believe, have, I think I counted 8 or 9 free agents, after opt-outs. That's a third of the roster. That if it's 8, it's a third of the roster. If it's 9, it's more than a third. And so, for a team that won 101 games, that's a lot of decision-making that has to happen. There's no way all 8 or 9 of these guys are coming back. There's no way. So whether it's by choice or just by money or whatever it might be. So the team will look different next year. The team intends to, like I said earlier, to me the most important thing is, at this point, all we have is 101 wins. We have nothing else from the postseason. So the important thing is to build on that and keep the positive momentum going, and and keep the team moving in the right direction. And it's not like the core is coming back like it seems like the Braves always do. This team is going to look different, and it's still going to have to go forward. So, yeah, like you said, lots of difficult decisions between opt-outs, contracts expiring, things like that. But to your previous point, and I'm glad you started there, retaining Diaz was arguably, you can make an argument, the most important one. Some might say the second or third, but definitely up there in that list of 8 or 9. I think it's 8, actually, possible free agents.
It just seemed, for something to get done that quickly, there must have been conversation prior to the World Series that both sides were just like, this is what we want. They probably have been talking about this in September, maybe even earlier, that we'll get this done literally right after the World Series. Like, that's the way it seemed, and it's very obviously unmet. It's just Steve Cohen's just like, I want that guy. It's a good part of our brand. Let's do this. So moving on, there's so many different directions. Rich, I'm going to start with you with the offseason. And I guess I'll frame it this way because it's definitely something that's like in my mind now as to who you want to model yourself after in general with throughout baseball as Steve Cohen becomes more and more involved in this game. 2 years. Unfortunately, the Mets are still the Mets, but you can tell where they're going to be able to. Hopefully, unless it's really just that spiritual, they're going to be able to shed this entire thing. Because 2 years in a row, there's something what feels unprecedented that is as Mets as it can get, even as you see Steve Cohen's influence starting to show, With thinking about last season, and Kyle Schwarber's kind of come up at certain points while he was doing what he did. And I think it was our friend Mark C. Healy, who pointed out that they could have signed Schwarber at DH, but Sandy specifically, this is, and we are very, I think Mark Healy is one of the most trusted that I could think of when it comes to what sources say. And Kyle Schwarber could have been signed, according to him, but Sandy was just like, we got JD, we can take care of it that way, DH-wise. Why spend this money? So this is where I think that there's a very palpable difference in this offseason than prior offseasons. Especially, like we've said this, that Steve Cohen needed somebody familiar with running a team to come in since he wasn't, and he brought in the experience of Sandy Alderson. Sandy Alderson doesn't do a bad job, but I personally think, and I've thought this since at least 2018, probably partially in 2017, that Sandy Alderson's thought process is becoming a little too old school, and he's kind of stuck similar to what happened to Phil Jackson with the Knicks, that he was, it's just like, you're really just like not adapting properly. And I think Sandy Alderson, in some fashion, as much as I respect him, never adapted properly. So that is a big part of what this offseason looks like. So, anyway, I've been ranting. I think I threw it to Rich first. Rich, the offseason, where do you want the Mets to go?
Well, as I think about it, I think it's wise to not match Scherzer's money for deGrom. If something could work out on a short-term deal, like maybe 3 years, it's easy for me to say, but $30 million a year, something like that, which is not Scherzer money, but I believe he was due in the low 20s this year if he didn't opt out. So it's a raise, so you it's good faith, right? 3 years for a guy who's in his 30s, okay, guy with injury history. I think that's more than fair. I don't think they should chase deGrom around and try to match Scherzer's money and, for 3 or 4 years or more. I think that's unwise at this point, for all the reasons we already know about. So a tough decision there, but I would take a pretty hard line. Give him a raise so he could save face and say he opted out, he got more than he was going to get. But don't go crazy. Don't try to match Scherzer's money. Let's really test if this guy wants to be here or not. So that's that one. That's my take on that one. If he walks away, you've got more money to spend on other people. Now, moving on. Nimmo, I'm a big Nimmo fan. I think although he wasn't as elite this year with his on-base percentage, I think he's become a very good defender. Guy brings you power, speed, all of that. So I think about bringing Nimmo back. Looking outside, I would definitely let Carrasco walk. With regard to Walker, if you could get him at a team-friendly deal, maybe as a fifth starter, that's fine. I wouldn't peg him any higher than a fifth starter. Outside the organization, although there are some injury concerns with Rodon, I think he's the number one pitching target. He was absolutely fantastic for the Giants this year. To me, outside the organization pitching, Rodon number one. And I really want them to bring in Trey Turner. I've seen a lot of people say, well, where will he play? And that's a fair point. I don't like guys playing on position, so I don't want him playing center field. I don't like that idea at all. But I think you can play second base, and I think McNeil has shown you that he can thrive in the outfield. So as I see it, Trey Turner to me would be he's multidimensional. You could make him your second baseman or even third baseman. So who knows about Escobar? I mean, I know he had a good second half of the season, but Trey Turner just could do so much for you. Third base, second base. McNeil goes to the outfield. Now you have at the top of the order, you'd have Marte, you'd have Turner, and if you bring Nimmo back, you'd have a really nice top of the order. So outside the organization, bringing in, I would say Turner and Rodon are my top two choices. And also, I'll point this out before I kick it back to Mike. If you saw what they did with Vogelback, they brought him back, no pun intended, and at a pretty low amount of money, I think it's $1.5 million. My thought on that is, okay, if you could get that guy for that price as your primary left-handed hitting DH, maybe the strategy is spend more money somewhere else. Maybe they're not going to spend as much on DH, and that might give them some more capital for like a Rodon or a Turner. Maybe you bring in a JD Martinez to balance out Vogelback as your right-handed DH. That would be a good idea too. So those are my thoughts kind of in general.
That's a great starting point here. I think, Mike, Trey Turner, somehow if you can get this guy involved, he's one of the most impressive players I've seen in a decade. And if any of you watched that John Hamm promo video for Trey Turner's free agency, it was just so well narrated. It was clearly like the agent just like, here's what the stats are. Let's get John Hamm to read it. And I think that obviously, like if he wants to exclusively play shortstop, but you can probably sell him both money-wise as well as, environment-wise, and just trying to what the Mets are trying to put together right now and change the narrative, which has become my new let's keep pushing or whatever the thing I said when we didn't win the World Series. So, change the narrative. Signing Trey Turner is a good starting spot. There's a lot of things that Rich brought up. There's a lot of places to go. What say you, Mike?
I don't have a problem with any of that. Money is funny. Picking up on what Rich said about deGrom and, reaching Max Scherzer type money. It's funny how teams just shovel money at other teams' players, free agents, trades like we did for Lindor. But when it comes to their own, it's such a struggle. It's such a struggle if you're a player to get paid when you're dealing with the team that you came up through their system. It's funny to me. Go back. Darryl Strawberry. I remember his headline, I want to be the richest. So we let him go, and what do? We shoveled a whole bunch of money at Vince Coleman. So stupid. deGrom. I don't want to break the bank on him either. I find this situation very conflicting. I don't know what the hell is going to go on. I want to see youth, Sam. Like I said, I'll reemphasize, I want to see Francisco Alvarez. I want to see Vientos. I want to see Brett Beatty. You know, and work on getting players to surround these guys with the people that we're going to retain around Lindor, around Alonso, etc. McNeil. That's what I'd rather do. Have to fortify the starting pitching all over again. But I want to go with youth. Look at Houston. Look how they're just turning out talent. You know, they've been to the American League Championship Series now, 6 years in a row. And now they just won the World Series without George Springer, without Garrett Cole, without Carlos Correa, etc. They're churning out talent. That's where I want to be. And not just because Houston won the World Series. That's what they're doing. They're churning out talent. Look around the playoffs this season. Cleveland came out of nowhere with all this young talent, etc. San Diego, you know, they pulled their youngsters pulled the rug out from under us, you know. So I want to be part of that movement. We don't have enough talent for a mass call-up, but now, like I said, that Alvarez and Vientos and Beatty have been exposed, I want them up and playing. You know, so money-wise, it's spending is going to look ludicrous with whatever plan they come up with. And on that note, you know, Billy Epler is now back to zero. He had a good, you know, off season last year, earned a couple of chips, but he lost them at the trading deadline. So his position is flat. Let's see what kind of off season he has.
I'll go back to Vogelback. If it was only $1.5 million, that was a no-brainer. There was only a certain amount of money that would have changed my mind. But, you know, again, I have a feeling about this guy, Rich, and I don't mean to exactly send it over to you with Vogelback. I actually mean to send it over to you with the Houston Astros, crazy enough. But again, I just wanted to specify how much I like that kid, and I like the fact that he was only available at $1.5 million. Yeah, you make that deal. Bring him absolutely back. You know, I said it earlier before, Rich. Like, Steve Cohen said that he wanted to be the Dodgers East. That's not who you want to be emulating, is the idea of spending all this money but not have anything to show for it except for a 2020 World Series championship. What you want is what the Houston Astros are doing. And what the Houston Astros are doing are also within the confines of them being public enemy number one. They continued to show that regardless of whether they were very, 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 very iffy with the way they got an edge, because let's face it, every team tries to get an edge, but they clearly violated the unwritten edge rule, if you will.
Cheating?
Yes. However, we've even heard of other allegations that sound rather interesting since then of other teams, including the Red Sox, including the Yankees. Let's just remember, because we all tend to forget sometimes, and I'm not accusing you guys of doing that, but a lot of times it becomes whatever's the thing we're talking about. Bill Burr, who's a comedian, of course, was very angry that the Astros never really got any shit. And we all look back, like it came out right before 2020, which ended up having no fans. There was nobody who could hold them accountable in the moment. But it became that they, at least to themselves and the fan base, were the underdog, because all of a sudden they had a chip on their shoulder and needed to prove that they can do it legitimately, quote unquote. But I have to give credit Dusty Baker. I know some people don't like the way that he handled Steve Bartman, but that's in the past. People grow. And I don't know whether Dusty Baker exactly grew, but of course he's gonna. If people are asking questions in the moment, can you really fault him for leaning into the Steve Bartman issue at the time? Rich, I think the Houston Astros are, bar none, the team that every team needs to figure out how to be.
I agree. Consistent, sustained success. Now, with regard to the whole cheating thing, Manfred handled it the way he felt he had to. That's not the Astros' fault, by the way he handled it. Did they do something wildly inappropriate? They did. Did they get whatever justice was defined by Manfred, and he gave out that justice? Okay. And so to me, it's in the past. A lot of the thing about the Astros is that it was systemic cheating. It was the manager knew about it. The general manager knew about it. There were a lot of people involved in it. Well, most of those people are no longer with the franchise. They showed it the other night. So, a lot of those guys are gone now. Some are still there. Altuve's still there. Bregman's still there. But a lot of the guys who potentially benefited from the cheating scandal, of course, the manager and the GM are gone. So they've done a pretty good job of cleaning house to mostly get that stain off of them. What they did this year was they won legitimately. You have every reason to believe they did, and good for them. They were able to, almost fully wash that stain off. Now, with regard to them being the model, absolutely right. Because let's look at a case in point. Let's look at Correa. So, what do the Astros do? They have a very good, still young player in Carlos Correa. And, okay, guy's really good, right? He's hitting his free agency. Well, you know what? We don't have to bring this guy back. You know why we don't? Because we've got a young man named Pena who we don't have to spend on Correa because we've got his backfill. We've groomed his backfill already. So, Correa, you could walk and, we'll use that money to shore up somewhere else. But we have the kind of an organization that you want to be, like Mike's talked about, where, yeah, we have a really good player about to hit free agency. But you know what? We got a guy right behind him, so he could go. We don't have to go hog wild, bring everybody back because we're deep. We're deep as an organization. That's how we sustain success. That's why we've been in the ALCS virtually every year since 2017. That's how you get there. It's not because you signed the greatest free agent. That helps, but that's not how you sustain success. You sustain success because you're a deep organization, and that's absolutely where you want to be. I don't, like Mike said, or whoever, I'm not sure if you or Mike said it, Sam, but you don't necessarily want to be the Dodgers. The Dodgers have had success, and yes, they have. They've won the division every year since I think 2013, I think since 13, and that's great. But they're doing it with a very, very high payroll, and they're basically, if you ask them a question in private and say, for all you guys have spent, and like you said, do you feel like you've gotten the return on investment? They'd be lying if they said yes with all they've spent. And they have one pandemic-shortened, tainted World Series to show for it. The Astros, on the other hand, they're a machine. that their payroll it's not the lowest, but it's not at the very top. It's a lot less than the Dodgers, a lot less than the Yankees, a lot less than the Mets, and they just keep cranking out. They're an organization. They're not buying they're not drunken sailor spending. They are built for sustained success, and if you're an American League team, you're going to be dealing with them for a long time.
Mike, they've basically been doing this since 2014. 9 years that they have figured out how to be the best franchise in baseball, regardless of the 2017 curmudgeon. They've decided. Yeah.
Let's not forget they strung together a lot of bad seasons to get into this situation that they're presently in. They earned those high draft picks, and they parlayed them into Altuve and Correa and guys like that. But the turnover is so important. Look at this World Series alone. Jeremy Pena, 4 home runs, 8 runs batted in. Jordan Alvarez, front and center with 14 runs batted in. It wasn't Altuve who led that charge. It was the other guys. The constant churn is what they're most successful at, and that's where you want to be. The Dodgers, I don't know what's next for them. Kershaw is aging. Turner's aging. Yeah, they got Mookie Betts and they got other players, but they're going to have serious problems on their hands within the next couple of years. So their future is uncertain too. But their ownership loves to spend money and have been doing it ever since Magic Johnson's his team came on board. So Dodgers will remain the Dodgers. They sell out every game. They don't have those issues. But Houston, what Houston needs, we consider that, well, actually Houston is a pretty big market nowadays, wouldn't you say? But still, look what they're doing. Look at these playoffs. Look at the abundance of young talent that performed, and a bunch of veterans who didn't. And, Bryce Harper, he performed, obviously. But look around. Sometimes you got to get caught in that whirlpool and turn with the times, man.
That you do. I had like 2 different places I was going to go, but it was just so many different places to go that I kind of spaced on it. So I will pass it on with about 12 minutes left to my compadres to decide where to go. Rich, first.
Well, I think we've talked about what our priorities are for the off season, and I think the deGrom thing is the most fascinating story of the whole thing. Yes, we touched on it, but I'd like to do just a quick deep dive on it to see what you guys think. Bring him back or not. And obviously, we don't know the dollars, but that is a very important decision, and it will impact what they do otherwise. Because I know Cohen will go up to $300 million. I think that's what we're hearing. But if you're giving $80 million of that to deGrom, or $86 million if you match Scherzer's money to deGrom and Scherzer, you're limiting. That's a third of it in 2 people. That's close to a third of it in 2 people, and so it's going to have a big impact. Now, if you give him the money and he's good, that's a great big impact, right? That's on the positive side. If you give him that money and he ends up hurt or whatever, now you've got, like I said, if you match Scherzer, $86 million of what could be around $300 million tied up in 2 people, and you're otherwise limited. And then you're battling the whole, he grew up in the Mets organization. Do you want to keep him and all this kind of stuff? I'm fascinated by how they'll handle deGrom. I really, and I know we know that Eppler spoke to him the night that they got knocked out by the Padres. Who knows what that conversation was like? But Eppler was saying that it was really a question of letting him know exactly where the Mets are and what the Mets want to do with him. So I don't know, just if you guys have a thought on how you handle DeGrom.
I'll start. I think that, when you talk about DeGrom, I have to start with that, this is about negotiating with somebody else in many ways. I think first and foremost, whether DeGrom is even considering going anywhere else, the last people he negotiated with was his former agent and the Wilpons. So I knew from the second that Jacob DeGrom said this at the beginning of spring training, I was like, well, yeah, of course. He gets an opportunity to negotiate with a different owner and not his former agent. Two things that make sense to me. Whether or not he's going to entertain going anywhere else, he has talked about the idea of how special it is to finish with the same team in the same uniform. I believe I heard him talk about that. What we have to offer him seemingly is a partnership with Scherzer in these final years of Scherzer's baseball life. And this isn't the day Michael Kadire died again, excuse me. But, there's just what you saw develop with the pitchers this year seems to have been something that DeGrom liked, just based off of just visual, pickups on a fan, having as in depth of a watch as we do. People talk about Atlanta. Buster Olney was talking about Atlanta. Obviously, this entire idea that he's going to go to Texas, I don't know. All I know is when it comes down to it, who can pay him the most, depending on what DeGrom is looking for, it's Steve Cohen. So you hand that 4-year, $180 million deal that John Harper, I believe, of SNY was talking about. Was it John Harper, Rich?
I believe it was, yeah.
Okay. So if you're talking about that thing, and at his age, if you're talking about finishing a career with the same team, you're probably talking about matching that at 5 years and $200 million, let's say, or whatever, $220 million.
Right.
It can probably happen. And so when it all comes down to it, it probably depends on whether he wants to be a Met. So, then I'll pass it to Mike.
Wow. I would like to see him finish out his career as a Met. It would go down as something, very legendary in Mets history. However, he'll turn 35 in June. He's only pitched in 38 games over the last 3 seasons. I know one of them was due to the pandemic. Health is an issue, and it's a concern. And, philosophically, I don't like to handcuff myself with that kind of ludicrous money. So I don't know what's going to happen. I got my fingers crossed it'll remain a Met. And, the Mets will still be able to maintain some kind of flexibility and maneuverability, and we can make everybody happy at the same time. I'm just being hopeful, but who knows? Who knows? I know this is a Mets podcast, but look what's going on across town with Judge. Now, odds are the Yankees are going to say, all right, Aaron, go seek your market and then get back to us. And I guess their strategy is to match whatever it is that you can get. But does he want to stay here? Does deGrom want to stay here? Are the Mets going to allow him to go out, seek his market, and then come back and say, well, this is the best I can get on the market? Will you match it? I guess, Let's see what happens. I don't know, but it'd be disappointing if he's wearing a different uniform in 2023.
No, I think I'd be remiss to say, though, that, maybe we have to think about, the money differently now. And it's crazy to say that, and I understand where you're coming from, Mike, and I'll go back to you on this. Steve Cohen may be a different beast. And think about how much money he's making from the Mets alone when he puts this much money in. Mind you, I think it seems as if, attendance didn't really grow until later in the season. But, there is that to be thought of when, hey, if he can be the Houston Astros without Dodgers money, Houston Astros with Dodgers money, then, still he can compare himself to the Dodgers, but, get a little bit more return on your investment, like you say. But when thinking about deGrom and thinking about the money that is currently involved and who owns the team, does your idea of the whole thing change?
I get it. I get it. But there's still more players that are needed to fill a roster, and they cost money as well. Steve Cohen is here to, upset the apple cart. There's no doubt about that. I expect the Mets to be, if not first, within the top 3 of payrolls over the next 2-3 years. I expect that. Now, does he want to be far and away the leader in Major League payroll? I don't know if he's willing to stick it in other owners' faces like that. And here's the problem in this new climate of MLB baseball, where once upon a time the commissioner, he needed total support from ownership to implement whatever this, that, the other, or get any idea, pushed across the table. Now he only needs 23. What does that say about the remaining balance of owners? They have no say. So if all these small market teams, want to mutiny against Cohen, commission only needs 23 of them to put forward an action to prevent him or raise the luxury tax or whatever the hell you want to call it, or instigate salary cap in the next collective bargaining session. That's probably where this is all headed. And when that happens, oh boy, you know what? We'll cross that bridge when we get to it. But all the small markets are going to use the Dodgers, the Yankees, the Red Sox, the Mets, because he's definitely here to upset the apple cart, like I say. And when 23 of them go to the commission and say, all right, it's time, forget this, all right? Basta. No more with this crap. Institute a salary cap or increase the tax or punish these people for spending all this money. It's coming. It's happened in the other sports. Baseball, I'm surprised it hasn't happened yet, but baseball has the strongest players union of all the professional leagues. We know that. So, and thank goodness for that. Otherwise, who knows the horrors owners would have posed on baseball that they haven't already. But that's what this is all about. That's the way I see it. And that's the only thing I could really rationalize. Steve Cohen will be Steve Cohen, but if he goes too far, commission only needs 23 upset people.
You have been listening to the Metsian podcast, and we're so thankful that you do. And I'd be remiss, Rich, after Mike brought it up, before we go, what about Aaron Judge from a Metsian perspective?
No way. He's not coming to the Mets. If he doesn't re-sign with the Yankees, it's because he wants to leave this market, and he'll end up somewhere else, San Francisco, L.A., wherever it may be. But he's not going to the Mets. I mean, if he wants to stay in New York, he'll stay with the Yankees. But I do want to throw one more thing. I know we're at time, but real quickly, what was your initial reaction when you saw this thing that came out a day or two ago, that the Mets aren't expected to make a run at Judge because of the relationship that Cohen has with Hal Steinbrenner, that they have a gentleman's agreement not to pursue each other's free agents? What do you think of that?
I didn't hear anything until you just brought it up. Mike.
It doesn't surprise me. That sounds like something that's been going on for over 100 years.
Well said.
It's shocking.
Yeah.
It's collusion. I mean, you can't do it. You know, you if Exxon and Mobil decide to set the price of gas together, they weren't going to compete. That's you can't do that. And
exactly.
Now maybe,
and that's why I say it's been going on for over 100 years.
Probably has. You're right. Probably has. Now, but if that's true, that's wild. Does that mean the Yankees aren't in on deGrom? Does that mean that, that now with this relationship that just, there's a détente that it's going to feel weird, to know that the Yankees.
It feels like. No, I was just going to say that it just feels like it's a Suns thing. Like George Steinbrenner would clearly, that was not something that ever happened with George Steinbrenner and the Wilpons or the Doubledays. Like it's literally like as we saw in the '90s, he, took his own advantage of former Mets lore.
Yeah, it's crazy. And I just thought, when I read that, I said to myself, all right, so it's not the two of them saying, it's not like they could be in trouble with the commissioner because it's just somebody speculating. But certainly their speculation, they have such strong respect for each other that they've agreed not to compete for each other's free agents. That just surprised me, that's all.
Well, so I guess, Mike, this is where I was just going to pass it to you about the Mets angle pursuing Judge. Forget about everything. Rich was talking about basically from Aaron Judge's specific perspective. But what I want to ask you, and this is where we'll go with this, is what about the Mets? From a Mets perspective, do you pursue Aaron Judge, regardless of all the speculation or whatnot regarding whether either parties would ever involve?
Again, age factors into this. Injury history factors into this. If I'm going to give somebody the keys to Fort Knox, I might as well give it to deGrom because he's ours. Judge serves me no useful purpose. I can groom somebody in the minor leagues to hit low 300s, hit 40 home runs, drive in 120 RBIs. And that's assuming that 62 home runs or whatever is a rare feat. You know what I mean? I don't need to go there. I don't think the Mets need to go there.
Rich, finish us up on this point.
I agree completely. I think Judge is a great player, obviously. 60 most home runs in the history of American League player. He's special. He's all of those things, but I'm not giving him that kind of money. I mean, you could probably get two players to hit you 30 home runs each for half of what you give Judge. I'm just not going there for him. I'm not. Mike hit it on the head. He's 30. I think he'll be 31 next year. He may have a couple of, we'll call them 50 home run seasons left in him. He may, but he's going to sign. He's going to want at least 6-8 years. No way. I'm not tying up that kind of money in Aaron Judge or any other home run hitter in his early 30s. No.
Well, there you go. You have
and
been
if I may, that's what makes Edwin Díaz signing so good because of his youth. It's worthwhile. It's price-worthy.
Yeah. It seemed as if both understood. Again, it's hard to sometimes not look at these things from a marketing perspective, but when it comes to Edwin Díaz's value as a player solo on its own, the marketing aspect of a single player combined with the marketing aspect of a team, I really do think that's where the two parties just came together with the whole thing. And that's, kind of the bookend of our podcast, considering we got the entire thing started from an off-season perspective with the Edwin Díaz signing. So you have been listening to the Metsian podcast, and we're so thankful that you do. And we always love to give our final word. So I will pass it first on to not only for the final word, but, of course, the shameless plug with Mike LaColon starting.
Shameless plug. Brooklyn Charlie blogger. Baseball fan. Check it out. Final word. Something I said before. Back to zero. Good off season. Terrible trade deadline. So back to zero. Back to square one. Let's see how this off season goes. And I'm looking forward to Winter League Baseball and the World Baseball Classic. Just wanted to throw that in.
Well said. World Baseball Classic is back. We will have plenty of time to talk about that. And I'll pass it on to Rich Spirago for his shameless plug and final word.
Well, shameless plug, Mesmerized Online. And for my final word, Sam, you love music. You'll appreciate this. Mike, you do too. I'm going to invoke the Carpenters. We've only just begun. The off season has just started. There will be a lot of player movement. Some we may like, some we may not. We'll talk about all of it over the course of the off season. But Diaz, look, we're still talking about that. We will be for a couple of days. There's going to be a lot of that this offseason, between deGrom, everybody else, players coming and going. I really think there's going to be a lot of white water this offseason. So we've only just begun with Diaz, and it's going to be a wild ride. I really believe it will be.
I agree, Rich, and I am Sam Maxwell, the converted Mets fan, and you can find plenty of writings from way yonder back on convertedmetsfans.blogspot.com. The Bedford and Sullivan podcast, Bedford and Sullivan Brooklyn, where, Mike, I'm sure we're going to have a fall episode very, very soon now that it's actually cold. And I love the Mets. I love movies, and one day I hope to put those passions towards something grand. So that's my shameless plug, and my final word is change the narrative. 3 words, however, that is my new mantra with this team. It doesn't matter how much you are able to change. And I talked to somebody, ironically a Phillies fan, at Rudy's Bar and Grill, another shameless plug. Come get a hot dog and $5 beer shot. All together, the hot dog's free with every drink that you buy. Come there, 44th and 9th. There's a giant keg outside. We've been around since 1933, and even before that with the liquor license. And you put 2 and 2 together there. You got to understand, I met this Phillies fan who said he works for the Mets. He just joined them at the beginning of the year, and he's decked out now in the off season in a Phillies jersey at Rudy's. And I'm pretty sure this was the no-hitter night. How do you figure out how to stop the momentum of 7 or whatever home runs, World Series record of home runs in a game? How do you stop that? You no-hit the team. But I asked him, I said, in terms of he started at the beginning of 2022 and basically near opening day, he said, And well, I was like, well, you probably work with a lot of people that have been around for years, including the former Wilpon. And he told me straight up that it's a 180-degree turn when it comes to how happy people are with what's happening above. And that's what Steve Cohen has done. This is only the second year. However, regardless of that turnaround, the narrative has still not changed. We are still historically, blowing it weirdly. And you don't want to think like that, but that's exactly what continues to happen. First, 2021, we have plenty of days to absorb it. And in 2022, it's just a knock in the jaw. So we have to figure out, no matter how much success we have going into game 154, 155, 156, 157, yada, 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 we have to figure out how to change the narrative. We had never won a division the way we could have. And we still figured out a way to give me that feeling that I had in 2015 Game 4 going home on the subway. You have to figure out how to change the narrative. And this offseason is going to have a big part of it, but somewhere in there, somewhere in that vibe of the clubhouse, whatever it is, that continues to peel off from Mets season to Mets season, they have to figure a way to change the narrative. And those are my final three words. Take care, everybody. Let's go, Mets. Welcome back to another Hot Stove. Take care, everybody. Thanks, Mike. Thanks, Rich. Thanks, everybody out there.